All right,
So
take it away. Yeah,
it says I'm screen sharing. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so again, I'm new to this, so as I'm sharing my screen, I'm not seeing everybody else. So I'm just gonna just try to keep flying. So um, I'm I kind of have met with some people from the Fort Lauderdale brigade, and I'm very interested in civic software. I actually met Lucas Chiaffi, who's one of the people behind KikoChat a long time ago at the Personal Democracy Forum. So it's kind of nice to, I guess, start interacting with folks like this again. But I'm very focused on ranked choice voting, very interested in it as a result of a long interest going back to my doctoral dissertation. This is a little bit about me. I have a degree in international relations from the University of Miami. I studied internet governance, which is where I got exposed to ranked choice voting for the first time. You can find me at Gaitis on Twitter. That's how it's pronounced, Gitis. And Gaitis is like a really good catch in the sport of freestyle frisbee. Um, and I'm also inspired by the concept of Indaba. It was interesting to hear in the previous discussion the notion of aloha and how inspiring that concept of empathy is for people. Indaba is an African term that means collaborative venue or important meeting. It's also kind of festive, and it struck me as well, inspiring to me because it shows how the notion of collaboration is actually deep in our bones. So, and I turned that into a company a few years ago with the mission statement of building better tools for better democracies. So what I'm going to hopefully get through quickly is just an understanding of what ranked choice voting is, explain the motivation for this project, and hopefully we'll play with some interfaces and then have a lot of time for brainstorming. And also to say, in the course of working on this project, I was in a group on Facebook called the Open Source Party. And of course, it's important that software like this for the purpose of democracy be open source so that people can understand it. But especially with something like ranked choice voting, I think it's important to have open algorithm. People don't need to code it as much as they need to understand how it works and what this tabulation system is all about. And because I've been working with this for a long time, I've got some blue sky ideas. It's not just the typical uh, benefits of ranked choice voting, but I'm trying to think a few steps ahead. Now, I had asked if we could do a poll on how familiar people are with ranked choice voting, but I saw that there weren't really that many people who signed up for this group. And since I actually can't see the group now, that's kind of interesting because I'm still getting used to this. Um, is there anybody, just speak up, who says, I have no clue what this is. I'm just here for, finding out what this new word means. Anyone?
Well,
I
Craig,
don't know very much about this and would love to get like the 101 version.
Okay. And
okay.
on
And
the
also
other,
just to help you out, Craig, I think in the top right corner, you might be able to click, well, others might know. Oh,
well,
I'm sorry. If you're sharing your screen and looking at your screen, you would have to separate your windows.
yeah,
Like,
I think I
okay.
finally clicked around enough and then I did separate the windows, so now I can
Okay.
see.
Okay, great.
So someone spoke up and said they will, and I will do a 101 on that. How many are familiar with it? Speak up to say yeah, or did we do that poll? Did that work?
Yeah, we did create an Airtable poll. I can share the link. Sorry about that. I kind of spaced on it.
Well, anyway, the point of it is, more and more discussion is happening about ranked choice voting, and I was hoping that in a civic tech group we'd find that more than half the people here felt very comfortable with the idea, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I still need to, we still need to talk about it. So instead of voting for one person in an election, you have the opportunity, you would have the opportunity to vote first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and so on. And there are different kinds of tabulation systems, but the one that's most commonly used here in the United States and around the world is called instant runoff voting, which is still a one person, one vote algorithm. What it means is, if you have, let's say, 6 people in a campaign, no one gets 50%, then the person who got the least number of first place votes is excluded, and all the people who voted for that person as their first choice now have their second choice become their first choice, and you do another round of voting until someone gets 50%. So they use that in Robert's Rules of Order. That's how they vote in Ireland. That's how they vote in Australia. That's used for Academy Award voting these days. So it's becoming more and more common. And now one of the reason why is it gives, if, for example, in 2000, if I had wanted to vote for Ralph Nader, but I was told, well, you're just throwing your vote away because you really don't want candidate from the R party, you want the candidate from the D if you're more likely to be a Nader voter. Well, this would say to the Nader voters, please go ahead, tell us your first choice. Don't worry about wasting your vote because your second choice will still count if your first choice isn't the winner. So, and then as a result of that, third-party candidates wouldn't be scared away, wouldn't be denounced as people who are upsetting the two-party system. So that's why it's become so popular in Maine, which has a very strong independent candidate tradition, and it's been complicated for them. So now that's they're using it there. They use it in Oakland, I believe, San Francisco, Cambridge, and now New York City next year. It's going to be probably the largest ranked choice voting ballot in certainly in American history. And I was concerned about that because it's a new system for a lot of people, and the way the rollout goes will have a lot of consequences. So, in addition to these basic benefits, I've been working on these systems for a while, and I realize it's not just a tool for voting, it can be a tool for thinking. It can be a tool for bubbling up the best ideas, and something that can be treated as a global suggestion box. And with better interfaces, people who have similar, maybe different first choices, but similar second and third choices can come together and throw their weight together. Or the other way, people have similar first choices, they can consolidate around second choices and have more influence in the outcome of an election. So let's see. Again, people in New York are going to be experiencing something very new. It's going to be a challenge for the people managing the election. As I follow the New York papers, I get the sense that they're a little bit behind schedule in preparing to do this. The only thing I can really do is create online apps and other kind of interfaces to at least expose voters to this in a fun way, so that they'll say, hey, you know what? I'm not going into the voting booth and seeing this for the first time. You know, I played around with this on my phone, and I have an idea of what's going on. And the better things go in New York City, the better things will go for not only ranked choice voting reforms around the United States, but all kinds of election reform, because it'll show, you know, a big city like New York City could do this, have a strong and happy experience, and, you know, let's be brave and try this elsewhere. And my own value proposition for this is to say, you can have not just a ballot, but an interactive system that lets voters get information about the candidates. And I'll be illustrating that in the when we go to the sandbox. Now, these are the kinds of paper ballots that voters may be presented. The one on the left is the more likely one, which is kind of a grid system. So the concern I have with this is, as ranked choice ballots get more and more crowded, these pieces of paper can get very, very large. So I've been on my online system, I've been working with, something that's, let's say, much more careful about the use of space. And I'm gonna go back and tell a story about, let's say, a great epiphany I had. One of the advocates of ranked choice voting, that's fairly well known, a big celebrity, is named Chris Novoselic, who was the bass player for Nirvana, and he's become the, I think was the chair for Fair Vote, which is a national proponent of ranked choice voting. And I got to participate in some different groups with him, the Open Source Party and various other groups. And I've heard that he was going to Minneapolis when they were adopting ranked choice voting, and he was going to host a battle of the bands, and they were going to use ranked choice voting to determine who won. And I was wondering, well, how are they going to do that? Because it's not a trivial thing to organize a ranked choice ballot. And I wondered, just did as a thought problem, how could you do this on Twitter? How could you do it in a way that has something that's instantly accessible without even a separately written app that could make this go? And I conjured up the idea of you create a kind of a voter guide. Every band would get like a 2-letter name, and everybody who wants to vote would then tweet in order the 2-letter alias for the band, and then there would be some other kind of thing that would do the tabulation. And now I realize that actually this would be probably even a better system for handling ranked choice paper ballots going forward. So I've taken out a provisional patent application, and I've thought about other ways to make the voting process much easier, and easier to manage, and easier to audit, and easier to let's say, maintain the tokens after the fact, so that if other people want to go back and audit it years later, it'll just take less space. So that's not really what I'm talking about for um, what I'm proposing for New York City next year, but I just want to show people some of the ideas I've been working through. So now if you go to, oh, it's not yet, I'm saying, again, what I'm offering to what I want to build for the voters in New York is a way for them to play around with a ranked choice interface and also see videos for different candidates issue by issue. So the voters in New York would be able to say, here's what we think are the 10 most important issues of the campaign. And then through the interface, they would be able to see what the candidates have to say on each of those issues. So that's a value proposition. Also thinking long-term, it would be API based, so that you wouldn't need to use just the interface that I present, but other people could create other sites, skin it different ways, and still access the API. And of course, if it's open source, once people understand the API, they can build their own back end, build their own front end. They wouldn't have to rely on the system I'm creating at all. I'm not an expert on blockchain at all, but with what I know about it, I'm putting it together in a way that I think the blockchain people will be happy. And as I participate in kind of voting wonk groups, there's always a few people who come up and say, we need to be able to do this with blockchain. And it's really just a way of having a distributed persistence of the votes that have been submitted. So in order to do that successfully, again, presenting the data in a lighter way is going to make it easier for people to persist that data across their blockchain. So then also liquid democracy friendly, that's probably a new idea to folks here, but this is something that's been talked about a lot in Europe, which is to say we want to have not necessarily direct democracy, but a way of working with proxies. So you select a representative and you normally trust that representative to represent you in the legislature somehow. But if you care to disagree, there's a way that you can propose a different proposition or a different fact base for the item under the discussion and have other people select you as their proxy. So again, that's not something that I'll be showing today other than to say, I think it's important to, if you're thinking long-term, to think also about liquid democracy. And we're going to be seeing this channel-based navigation in a little bit. So let me see now, I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to try to pull something else up here. Let's see how good it is at letting me do that. Now, did the screen change on you folks?
I didn't see a change. I still see your slide about SQL tabulations.
Uh-huh.
But the way that you chose to share screen,
Uh-huh.
you have a couple options.
Yeah.
And so if you click share screen again, it might give an option that is to share your entire desktop. I think that's probably
Okay.
what you will
So I'm going to
need.
do the stop share maybe. And
Or actually, it would be even better to share, to do an application. It sounds like you're.
Well, I have a website. I was just going to show the site. And actually, folks there, if you have a split screen or something else you can do, you can go there yourselves. It's a sandbox I've created called stadiumlogic.com. And the reason I have that name is I've participated in different hackathons and so on. And one of them, in order to show the versatility of the ranked choice voting interfaces, you can use it for movies, you can use it for voting on most valuable players. So that was at a sports-oriented hackathon. So that's what we've got. Now, if you are on the front screen of stadiumlogic.com, those of you who've tried it, you're going to see something kind of in the middle of the list called American Priorities with a right arrow on it, and click that. And while people do that, I'm going to try to share my screen again, and let's see what it lets me do. So I'm going to do this and then share.
So I would.
Did it work?
Awesome. Yep, I see it. I see it now.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to become a pro by the end of the day on this. So now what's going on here is within the American priorities, we would have I have a list of things that I just created, and you'll notice I'm going to click on one of them. And actually that's the one where the video was already showing. If I click on another one, the video for that would show. So eventually we'll be able to, within that video area, I probably did the link incorrectly. Within those areas, you could even have text, you could have D3 graphics, you could have tweets, so people could scroll through and see what kind of content the candidate is offering on that particular topic. And then there's different ways to rank. I'm just going to use a drag and drop right now, and you can see it puts the number 1 in. But also, this is assistance friendly, so if I put in the number, I'm going to type the number 1 in here and press enter, and it should go there. If I tab around, now also if I press the up arrow, this is another assistance feature, it moves that option up. So in current assistive ballot devices, they look like kind of joysticks. So this would help people who need assistance do ranked choice voting. Now they're still able to do that with the current systems that are out there, like the grid thing and the checkoffs I showed before. But it's important to be able to do that, and that's really what I intended to show here. So let's see. I actually don't. I think that was it. There was one other thing. If people wanted to sign up for the beta, I've got a Twitter site, Ames poll, and if you just follow Ames poll, that's where I would be putting that information out. That's really going to be the flagship brand for this ranked choice voting system. I've also already got the domain name, something like Mayor 21 for New York City. And this sandbox yet doesn't accept sign-ins. It doesn't accept votes yet. I'm just really just learning how to do this with Angular. I've done previous versions in PHP, MySQL years ago that I had running on Facebook. People were voting on political things, were naming the teams of their sports teams, American Idol, things like that. But that wasn't really mobile friendly. This is doing this with an Angular front end and Angular material. It's much more modern tooling, so it's going to be much easier to make it mobile friendly. Right now, in fact, it's already a PWA, a progressive web app, which means that I've done a lot of the work to make this postable in the Android Play Store and ultimately the iPhone store. There are other ranked choice systems out there. FairVote has one that's free to use called rankit.vote. There are a couple of other ones that charge small fees. Even Google has a way of doing ranked choice voting. SurveyMonkey has one. So really, what's distinguishing the system that I'm trying to build here is the ability for voters to look at this and get information about the candidates as they're interacting with the ballot. So, and it also then gives the candidates an opportunity to feel like they're going to be allowed equal time to present their case on different issues. So people can really get apples to apples comparisons as they use this system. Oh, you were muted, Timothy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so in the spirit of unconference, I think I'm trying to think of a way to kind of get a discussion going and hear from everyone who's attending. And I think it might be interesting to ask the question to the group, why did you come today? So why did you come to this session? What were you interested in? What kind of questions do you have? What maybe concerns or ideas do you want to share? I'd like to offer that to the group and see what comes of discussion.
Yeah, I'd be interested as well. But everybody's so quiet.
It's a long day on Zoom.
I'll break the ice. This is Jerry from San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
I just came because I had been to the previous Indigenous session, and I figured I'd just try something different here. But I am interested in elections, of course. But I've seen the clean elections movement, which I really supported, and that is where candidates each get a certain amount of money and they agree to not take any other money, and they can only spend that amount of money, and it's publicly funded. So if you have a president, you each get $100 million, that's it, I like that idea just because it would get them focusing on issues more than bashing each other, I think. But I like the ranked choice voting just for the reason you mentioned about third-party candidates' abilities to break into the market. And I was confused about the one thing you said is that, from what I understood, is that you pick your first and second choice. If your first or second choice makes it to the top, then you stay in as a voter. But if you pick the options 3, 4, and 5, and they didn't make the top 2, then you don't get to vote again. I think that's what you said.
So no, that's not what I intended to say. I'm sorry. So if you voted for someone as your first choice, who gets the least number of first choice votes, and no one gets 50%. What that means is now that person that you voted for first is eliminated, just like any runoff. but you would get, if in any runoff, you would get to vote again in the next round. So who's your next first choice? That's the person who was your second choice before. So just as long as you've voted someone who is still eligible, who hasn't been eliminated round by round, you've still got a chance to make your voice heard.
Yeah, and the other big concern I have is anytime I see something like the interface with the videos, is that if you said each one of you get 1 minute and you get to use this 1 minute and that's the slot we're going to give you. I like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of using public interfaces like or not public, but proprietary interfaces like YouTube or Facebook as the host because they have a business interest in tracking who and how many times the ballot, the video has been watched on every topic and every subject and across the country. Because in a general election, there's about 1 million people on ballots and plus all the propositions. So there's a wealth of information and valuable data as to who's interested in what and blah, blah, blah. So I would prefer keeping that out of the hands of the big giants, just for privacy rights. But the other concept I like to champion is the pro and con, I would love to see on a proposition the 30 seconds pro, 30 seconds con perspective. And because whenever we see things, we're always hearing whatever made the ballot terminology and whatever made the statements through committees, but we rarely get to hear the negative side of things. And I think there's a lot of value in that because I don't think a lot of people read their ballot book and then vote. I think a lot of people are just, going down the ballot and ticking off things. And if they had a chance maybe to learn easily pro and con, that might be a good thing.
Oh man, Jerry, you're speaking to my heart. I have a bit of an opposition to ballot props. I hate that is like the part of California that I dislike the most is how many ballot props I have to vote for.
Yeah. Because
I think there's probably at least 20 ballot props on my ballot this year. There's like at least, I think there's at least 12 state props and then there's local ones too. So I think that's funny when I hear advocates for liquid democracy and things that involve like high degrees of voter participation and engagement. And I don't know, it's kind of funny. I get the principle of it. I think it's a difficult reality, and I wish that I could just elect people that represent me to make decisions for me about whether we should fund a stem cell research institute in California. Like I don't think voters are the best people to decide about whether we should be funding a stem cell research institute with taxpayer money. It's like, why that, So I think that's kind of interesting.
I'm curious, like, do you feel like someone more?
I just want to come in and add a little bit of spiciness to this discussion.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like a little bit of controversy. So on the stem cell, just as an example, not getting into the issue, but like, do you feel like someone that you would trust to make a better decision than you, or to be able at least to be able to make a decision without doing as much research as you'd have to do about an issue like that? Like, is there someone you could be like, oh gosh, if they could research it, they would, I trust their vote, and then like I could research something for them that maybe I'm more experienced in?
I mean, I guess like the way that I see it is like we have to produce a budget every year to know what we're spending our money on, and there needs to be someone who's expert enough at allocating funds and kind of deciding our priorities as a state that we should that person is the one who should decide whether stem cells make the cut or not. That even if I had someone who's like a scientific expert in stem cells and they're like, yeah, 10 billion for stem cells, that sounds great. Like, I don't know, man, because it has to be like a global thing. And that's like what I want to hire a professional policy person to do, right? So I don't maybe there's problems in how, like, I think ranked choice is like a great thing in terms of like how to elect representatives, but I don't know. I feel personally like representative democracy, you know, I don't know, like I don't get me wrong. There are many times when I do not agree with my representative, and currently I'm represented in the Senate by Dianne Feinstein, and I don't like that very much. But there's a lot of things like that. But I think you know, I find it hard to think that like there would be someone better than like a professional policy person to decide like the budget, you know?
See, I'm worried
Yeah, the only
about
reason
that.
I wanted to clarify that about liquid democracy is that the liquid in liquid democracy is whether you want to handle it democracy directly or representationally, right? So you can delegate your vote out. So you could like look at you could vote for the same politician that you do now and just say, this person handles everything that has to do with budget. And you could just give your vote to them every time, effectively recreating the system we have today where they represent you. But if like there's that one vote where you're like, wait, actually not that one, I disagree, you can take your vote back.
Yeah,
so that's
which is
what
very
I like about
appealing.
liquid democracy is that
Yeah.
you get to decide kind of the weighting of how much time you want to put in versus how much you want to trust someone else, and do that dynamically. But
So I'd like to add
Yeah.
also that part of it is just providing voter citizens with better information about what their legislators are up to. And you know, that's kind of a bigger question about how do you present that information in a digestible way. So I want to respond to something Jerry said, and maybe push back a little bit about his reluctance to have some of this information hosted on YouTube. You know, I can't invent the entire wheel, and it's also true that candidates, for the most part, will use the most familiar social media because that's where you know, they think their voters are going to be comfortable finding them, and that's also something that they're comfortable using. So the virtue of YouTube and Twitter over Facebook is that you know, Facebook is really kind of a closed garden. At least with YouTube, the URLs are publicly available and pastable. So
Yeah, but it could be done by, you know, if we were to turn as a nation towards elections, that could be a private agency, or I hate to say a federal agency, another one, but that could be like a Wikipedia or a archive.org or somebody that's disengaged politically, because Google owns YouTube and Google makes money off of, you know, their algorithms and marketing. So that, you know, I don't want a company that's a marketer that uses my sentiment and my emotions to show me other videos that might sway me and alter how I vote and how others might vote. So I think they have there's a conflict of interest with them as a business, and in the same with Facebook. But regardless of the URLs, it's the point is that they're a marketing company that is making money marketing.
Yeah.
They don't make money hosting,
so
you know, elections.
So in the spirit of unconference, I want to include 4 voices. It's
Sure.
fun because we have such a
Thank you.
small group. Everyone could talk. I really appreciate you breaking the ice, Jerry. I just want to make sure we're not rabbit holing into too much of a debate, which I think I am guilty of as well. I was curious, maybe if Jennifer or Bolun, if you're interested in weighing in on this or bringing up back to the kind of the original question, like why you came, what interests you in this session. And I like to hold a little bit of awkward. Oh, great. Jennifer's coming on.
Yeah, I come out of hiding. I took myself off mute. I have always been really interested in, I mean, various ways of making decisions. So I thought this was a great opportunity to learn a little bit more. There's a variation on this that I really like doing called multi-voting, which is not about ranking your choices, but if we're looking to choose from a slate of, say, 7 projects, to let people vote for 3 by either putting all 3 votes for their favorite project, or picking their 3 favorites, or 2 and 1. Obviously, you can kind of switch up how many votes you give people. And that's something that, for example, I like to use in a teaching situation where students are picking topics or projects or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a very nice system. I think we used that in one of the demonstrations yesterday. We were putting dots on a screen as one of the groups, I don't remember it. Yeah, and that's it's simple, and it's a lot easier to use than ranked choice voting, frankly. I mean, undeniably. But the idea of working with multiple candidates has been around for a couple centuries, the idea of ranking this way. And some of the math behind it gets so interesting and so intriguing, and that it's actually been the topic of a Nobel Prize in economics. And I think I even mentioned it in one of my slides, but they basically, the prize was awarded to Kenneth Arrow for showing that no system of voting is perfect. The only thing that works is a dictatorship. So in the meantime, what do? And we're experimenting with these different systems. A lot of people are going for ranked choice voting. And the problem with the DOT system and some of the other tabulation systems that ranked choice voting uses, like the board account and the Condorcet, is that they are not really one person, one vote systems. You know, with the dots, you would necessarily have more than one vote. With the Condorcet or border tabulation, there's different point assignments or runoffs or round robins. So the thing about the instant runoff vote, it really is just like a runoff. So it's legally in keeping with the way we already do things, and there's going to be fewer challenges going forward as a result of that.
Yeah, can I pose a question as you bring this around to the legalities of how we currently do things? So, you know, we have methods in place by which the U.S. Constitution can be amended. Various states have various ways of amending the state constitutions. How does that work in an environment to adopt ranked choice voting when you can't do it by ranked choice?
Oh, well, there's a long road ahead to fixing our democracy, isn't there? So that's why, you know, these experiments are happening locally. You know, do people understand the system? Are they happy with the result? In fact, I guess it was the discourse, I posted several links related to videos I've created and other things that may more comprehensively explain the way ranked choice voting works. But I also did a video on Burlington, Vermont, which used ranked choice, which tried instant runoff voting and actually abandoned it. And what the controversy was there. And it gets technical. I don't want to blow you away with all of it, but some of the tabulation systems are actually better at locating the consensus in a population than others. Instant runoff voting isn't really the perfect one for finding that consensus, and that was why the people of Burlington back to one of the reasons they ended up backing away from ranked choice voting. And I think so. Therefore, I think if they had gone in with the understanding of, you know, really what's going on when you add up votes in these different ways, I think there would have been less adversity when the result played out the way it did. So if we can give the people of New York a kind of a heads up of like, here's how it's worked for others. Here are the kind of things that you can expect if we have some sample votes and entertainment-oriented ones or sports-oriented ones where people can say, hey, you know, sometimes when it's a close election, you get this kind of result and this is how it happened, then it won't be so new and shocking, because none of these systems are perfect. It's just a matter of doing things that work better, and the plurality system we can see has just too many flaws. Emerson, you're about to speak.
Yeah, thanks, thank you. I want to know if you have any reference, maybe in order to research the system and some numbers that we can see about.
Let me see if I can, the links that I put in the discourse, and we have a lot of different places for this, and I'll try to put it in the chat. I had a whole bunch of, let me see if I can get access to the chat here. I'm trying to figure this out. If you, how do I, let's see here. If I stop sharing my screen, perhaps, then I have access to the chat now. That looks like that. There's the chat. And then I can now post my links in here that may hopefully help you out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone in the meeting, let's see here. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and the Burlington, Vermont one is interesting because, at least to me, being kind of a voting wonk, because I played around with a lot of data visualizations, and I participate in some of the ranked choice voting groups on Reddit, and where a lot of mathematicians show up, and people get extremely religious almost about what the best tabulation system is. My approach has been to say, look, all of them give us useful information, constructive information about how voters feel. So I'm not wedded to one or the other. I'm trying to show all of them. How affects the campaign finance? Do candidates make different choices about how to raise and spend money? That's a great question that I don't know the answer to, other than I believe that some of the candidates in Maine at one point were, two of the candidates teamed up and were doing some ads together saying, we both feel the same way, either vote for me and her second, or, you know, whatever, you know, but vote for one of us and then the other one. So
I feel kind of like an expert in this, being in Oakland, and my project that I work on with Open Oakland is a campaign finance project. Yeah, so we saw exactly that. That happens very regularly here. There was actually an interesting experience. So in California, like, everybody who runs for office is a Democrat, pretty much, right? We actually saw a Democrat team up, like do a ranked choice team up with a Republican this year, which was pretty interesting. I mean, I think it speaks to like the flexibility of that as an option. But yeah, I think like there is a lot more fundraising again, like in terms of campaign finance, it gives you another avenue to like oppose a candidate, because you can kind of team up with the other candidates in the race against that. You can team up more than you're able to do kind of otherwise.
But they team up because of issues, because of issue alliances. And that's to me is the most appealing part of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it's something I like about, like, in Germany, my understanding is there's like 5 major political parties, and that all are relevant to the outcome. And, you know, the ability to have a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more distinction that make them unique. They can be true to kind of their mission and values, and form temporary coalitions with each other in order to get things done in government. So they can form a majority without, you know, whereas in America, wherever you stand on, you know, even some like very controversial issues like abortion, those issues get passed back and forth between the two parties like chess pieces to garner power at one point or another. And from my perspective, none of the American parties have, or the two major American parties have, you know, real ideology. They don't really have, you know, because they have to do this passing back and forth chess pieces kind of thing. I'm speaking right now just as Tim and like my perspective. And so anything where you can have more distinct options that, you know, where candidates or parties think about, is it strategic right now to partner instead of just like a giant conglomerate of power. Anyway, sorry, that's end of rant.
Yeah. Well, part of the long-term challenge in the United States is to come up with party systems that are more representative of the people, and at the same time make the voting public more representative of the people. This country makes it very hard to vote. You know, I know there's a lot of concern with campaign finance. I would be more concerned with changing the voting day to a weekend or a holiday so that it's easier for more people to come out and vote. You know, find ways to empower people rather than play whack-a-mole with money. You know, and so that's one of the things that I want to have as a you know, ranked choice ballot in the system is, of all the election reforms we can choose from, what are your priorities? Would it be you know, ending Citizens United versus changing the voting day versus automatic voter registration, which is a very important feature. You know, guarantee the right to vote. I mean, there's so many other things that I think could actually benefit not only voter turnout, but also help inform voters better.
Bolin or Chris, do you have anything you want to share or shift our direction at all or anything like that? Just hoping that everyone is getting what they, you know, wanted out of this session. Feel free to chime in. Welcome, Annie. I've been asking people what they, I think you've come in and out, been asking people what they, what their interest is in this session, so that we get lots of input. Do you feel comfortable or interested in sharing about that? All right, well, I have a practice, if none of you have noticed, of doing awkward silences to make sure that people really do have a chance to collect their thoughts and participate. But I don't want to force it either, and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, just making sure that everyone feels welcome to jump in. Nice to hear from you on the chat, Bolin. So yeah, okay, well, we have, I'd kind of actually like to end in the next few minutes so that there's at least 5 minutes for people to break between sessions, because it can be a long haul on Zoom. Does anyone have any closing thoughts?
Well, I actually have a question for the people who are active. I mean, what do you suggest? You know, you see, I'm working on this project, and I'm very delighted and grateful that I've had the opportunity to at least present this to some people. You know, do you think this is the right approach? Just like go do a dog and pony thing, or should I be, you know, you say I need to be hooking up with people in New York City, or, you know, a lot of people talk about ranked choice voting, but not a lot of people do stuff about it. They kind of wait for things to happen, and I'm really trying to make things happen.
That's a tough question. I think there's a theory of change session later today. That may be interesting to think about, especially beyond the technology. You've certainly dove into, building demos, which I think is useful for people to see how things could work. But there's a lot more. Yeah.
Have you spoken with Noel yet, Hilago? Or Noel?
I have no. I noticed there was a presentation by a guy named Jason Anton, who seemed very tech savvy.
Well, yeah, and
Although
I'd also recommend talking to Noel because he is just Mr. New York for Code for America. So I think he could give you a lot of input, you know, and a lot of great insight, personally. And he's very approachable.
great.
One thing that was going through my mind with the presentation was, I know that it's awesome to have you here, Craig. I think one mantra that we have in the community here is like build with, not for. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think of applying to voting systems. I'm not sure exactly who, I guess the mantra is about partnerships and community organizing, and essentially like not trying to be like a tech savior, not trying to like come in from outside the community and make change, but rather partner with organizations that are kind of on the ground doing the work, the advocacy, that are experts in the area and stuff like that. So I think that's like one mantra that I think is that you'll hear a lot around here, and maybe
Sure.
it's worth thinking about. And especially like with Noel, like if you manage to connect with Noel, I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
Just kind of like, what are the right organizations to partner with, and what are the like how, and to Tim's point about theory of change, like how are those organizations going to help make a case for this to become like for your ideas to get further, you know? And I imagine it's quite difficult being in Florida trying to do that, but
Sure.
but yeah, I think that was my
Great mantra.
initial thought. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, with that, I think we should probably break so everyone gets a little bit of a bio break before the next session. But
Thank
thanks
you.
for sharing, Craig. It's fun, and we love welcoming people to the community. So hope to see you around. All right.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Craig.
So,
Take care.